Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to start off the meeting by registering my discontent about having this on Sunday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't know why I agreed to this, but this is just my personal taste. But it really broke up my Sunday afternoon, I got to tell you. In any case, so I would like to have some say-so in the time of our next meeting, if that's apparent. In any case, let's move on. Let's see who's here. Thank you for being here today. This is the April 2021 Marching Band Committee meeting. I'll call the district number. If you would, just say your name. District 1. Andrew, are you here?
Andrew Marock.
There you are. Yeah, as John says, we can't see you very well. We see this silhouette, but we see we know you're there though, so that's a good thing. District 2.
Connor Kinman.
District 3.
Grant Jones.
District 4.
Brian Ellis.
District 5.
Patrick Brady. I'm going to hang up and I'm going to call through the phone line. I've got really bad service.
All right. District 6.
Austin Brawley.
District 7.
Michael Stone.
District 8.
Jenny Hipple.
District 9.
Pauletta Smith.
District 10.
Curtis Irvin.
District 11. Jason, are you there? Okay. Not
You
hearing
better
Jason.
check your microphone choice in your lower left there, Jason, but we can read your lips.
District 12.
Dan Wise, I'm proxy for Corey Zilich.
All right, welcome, Dan. All right, moving forward, let's proceed. Do we have a motion to approve today's agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Michael Stone motions. We have a second.
I'll second.
Who was that seconded?
Curtis.
Curtis, sorry. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Those that are not in favor of approving the agenda, please speak up. All right, hearing no disapproval, the agenda is approved. You should have looked over your minutes from our last meeting back in February 27th. The link is on our agenda today, and give you just a minute or two to double check that, look it over, and I'll welcome a motion to accept and approve the minutes from February. Do we have a motion?
Andrew made a motion in the chat. I'll second it.
Okay. Andrew Marock and Michael Stone seconds. Anybody opposed to approving the minutes from February? Hearing none, they will be approved. All right, moving forward to reports. Starting with me, I really do not have much of a report at all today. I will say this: we've had some questions. I'll address this. We've had some questions from band directors in the last couple weeks, especially as they're gearing up for the upcoming season, about this do-over, and we call them 13th graders coming in. You know, students do have the option of coming back to high school and participating and being back in their high school programs again. So some questions have arisen about how will that affect being in marching band or in band in general. And the answer is it won't affect a thing. As long as those students are enrolled in the school of their high school or feeder program, then they are eligible to participate in any and all events that are band related, including KMEA events like marching state championships and KMEA and all state, all those, that stays intact. So our rules simply state that as long as they're a enrolled member within their school or feeding school, then they are eligible. So I don't know if any of you have students that maybe fall into that category, but rest assured that they will be able to participate to the fullest. I really have nothing else to report right now at this point. George, you're here for the evaluator coordinator position. Have you got some?
Yeah, good to see everybody. Happy Sunday. And I agree with Tim. Sunday at 3 o'clock, not a good call, but that's okay. We'll make it right next time. Happy to report that we've hired 24 judges for quarterfinals and 30 judges for semifinals, finals. So my work is done at this point. We'll get contracts out to them this summer and get all the other appropriate information that we need. But I'm really glad. I think this has been one of the easier years because I think everybody was so ready to get back to normal. And so everybody was good about communicating and answering emails from me about inquiring about whether they could judge or not. So that's all I've got, but I'm pleased to say we have all of our 54 judges for the 2 weekends all set.
Very good. Thank you, George. Dr. Strobe.
Sure thing. Well, things have moved a notch toward getting UK wrapped up and ready to go. I've had a good lengthy Zoom conversation with the two gentlemen that sort of co-manage the stadium for groups like ours, and they don't know yet what kinds of strictures they'll still be under in October. You know, we don't either. We're going to have to figure that out by September because we're going to have to sell tickets. And what we will need to know by then is whether we can sell tickets shoulder to shoulder or whether we have to leave a couple of seats between parties, which would be obviously much more complicated for our use. But we will, I'll continue to confer with them and we'll figure that part out. Just the same, it's reassuring to know that they're on board with it. They're looking forward to the event. Last time they were really easy to work with. Once we got over the hump of we can have it here, right? Yes, we can. Okay, so that's settled to go. The semifinal sites, I don't know. I haven't really pursued that yet. I have some thoughts, and I know where there is some interest in the region, and so we will see what we can do to get the schools to pony up. As you know, the difficulty always has been for the smaller classes to find a school that has a large enough stadium to host a semifinal. Even a slightly smaller semifinal as we have this year, but semifinal nonetheless, that isn't so busy competing in a different class that they decline the honor. So that'll be a little work to do. We know who's around. We know who the schools are. 2 or 3 of them, I can tell you right now, they'll do it. I know exactly what's going on, but I don't have all 5 or all 4 outlying sites for sure at all. That'll be fun. That's about it. I have conferred with George about the judges. One of the things that's sort of behind the scenes, I guess, is that at some point, George and I sit down and we figure out which judges go to which sites. And that's for quarterfinals and for semifinals. We just sit across the table from each other and actually I literally print out and manipulate little pieces of paper on a grid work to get it as right as we can, trying to take into account not only the expertise of the judges, but especially for quarterfinals, if there are any connections. And sometimes we failed and we've gotten tongue lashing about it, where we've allowed something to happen for some reason. Seemed like a good idea at the time, but put somebody there. Well, so and so's spouse works for one of those bands. Oh, well, okay, it wasn't the person, that kind of thing. But we'll try real hard to do that and do it well. But we can't do that until after the quarterfinals draw, because that's when we know, or right around that same time, because that's when we know which bands are at which sites. See, and until we know that, we can't avoid conflicts. So we just have to sit and get those contracts out for wherever, and let it simmer until such time. And that's just one of those things that has to happen every year. That'll do.
Thank you, Dr. Strobe. Brian, I have you on the agenda today. I haven't really talked to you, and I don't know if you had anything to report. We had, at our last meeting, we had just discussed a little bit about the Plan B scenario, and that you might incorporate the factors that happen with Plan B into the module. I guess more than anything, can you give us a report on, are there plans to continue the training module for this upcoming marching season?
Yeah. So Dr. Strobe and I actually talked a little bit about this a couple days ago, and one of the things that I will say up front, let me say this up front. I think that the training, the module 1, I think that was a successful first start for judges, and it seemed to go pretty smoothly for most of them, and I think that there were certainly payoffs. I mean, I know as a director, I saw some payoffs just hearing and seeing some things that were done. But that was just a first step. It was kind of an introduction step, and that was always my thought, and I know that most of you guys always knew that. So module 2 was going to be more, will be more in depth, and importantly, will take up more time to make it happen. And I will just be frankly honest. It's what I told Dr. Strobe when I talked to him. I do not see the possibility of getting that module 2 fully functional, fully ready for this season. It's for all of us. It's been a strange, crazy year. And there's a lot of new things on my plate that's happened recently that is just preventing me from being able to invest that time. I do want it to happen though. And I think maybe the better goal for the full rollout of module 2 would be the next year. Having said that, I do think that it might be important to do an appendix kind of to module 1. There's a I don't want to spin the wheels of this committee all day talking about this. So, maybe if you have some ideas and thoughts about what that might look like, I would certainly welcome those through some emails and or calls or whatever. But kind of talking out loud, one of the things that comes to mind is, we don't want to change the expectation. We don't want to change the process for the evaluation. But I do think that maybe there should be an appendix about, we're all coming out of a very strange year, and maybe, George, I would like to talk to you a lot about this too. Is there some tailoring that we should do, not to change the process, not to change the scoring, any of that stuff. But, is there maybe some information that we should share for our judges that might help this, I don't want to say transition year, but I mean, we all know we're kind of going to be coming up on a strange one. And then maybe, I was thinking earlier, maybe a short review of some of the important concepts from the module 1. I know in the WGI circuit, I mean, we have to go through those refreshers. George, DCI does that too, right?
Yeah, yes, they do have those going on.
Like a little bit of a refresher, nothing that's going to take up too much time, but just a refresher about, okay, let's, it's been 2 years. Let's remember these, let's be reminded of these concepts. And then, like I said, maybe a small appendix about, this is important, as we move into this new year. So that's some of the things that I've been throwing around in my mind. I think that those things would be doable for this year, and to be able to put that appendix out for this year. But I know that there's no way I can get a module 2 completed for this season. So I hope that helps, Tim.
It does. Thank you, Brian. Does anybody else have any questions for Brian or comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move forward. On the agenda next is unfinished business. We really did not have any action items, or most of last month's or last meeting was discussion oriented and mainly about Plan B. So there's really not anything that we don't have to follow up on. I was just going through last time's agenda, and I do remember one of the things was Brian just addressed the training module. The other thing was, and Dr. Strubbe brought it forward, and I just wanted to remind the committee, and I guess this would affects Dr. Strobel too in the KMA office, is that if indeed, heaven forbid, we do have to go to a Plan B, that we probably need to make sure we notify any 5A band directors that they need to leave October 23rd as an open date, just in case we end up that being our culminating event for the season. So I just wanted to put that in there just to make sure it was not forgotten more than anything, and that I don't know if that would come out in just a massed email, Dr. Strobel, or if it would be put into some other form.
Well, I think that that certainly is one place that it needs to be for sure. Anything that where we put any written description of the Plan B, we should probably also in bold letters somewhere on there say this would include 5A bands. But I'll just commit to you and to the committee that I'll very shortly, and I'm putting it in the minutes, that I will send an email detailing this circumstance, that if we should go to Plan B, 5A bands would need to be involved, because that would be the end of the season if that's what we did. And if they can't do that, then somebody else will get the trophy. I guess. So that I mean, we don't have any choice. And I know that's going to put somebody in a bad case, because they'll have plans to go to something in Atlanta or Indianapolis, and that'll be the day they want to do that. And I don't know what we can do except just advise them that this will be their choice.
Right. Okay. Very good. Any other questions or discussion about that? Okay. All right. Moving on to new business. I have written on the agenda, this simply says change minimum showtime requirements. This is certainly up for discussion, and I'm still not quite sure if this is in the form of a proposal, but in any case, we'll certainly open it up for discussion. If you recall, last year about this time, actually a little bit earlier than this time, maybe back in March at one of our several meetings, we had talked about the different scenarios and what ifs, if we weren't able to meet, or whether we had virtual contests, whatever happened to be. But one of the things we discussed as far as making it a little bit easier or more manageable for competing band directors, if indeed we were going to have competitions, would be to, I think we ultimately said in a blanket statement, we'll just eliminate all time minimum requirements that were currently in the rule book for 2020. And of course, we never had an official 2020 season from a sanction standpoint, so that didn't come into play. So it was brought up, a question's been asked, and maybe it isn't in the form of a proposal that we hear today, but the idea for this 2021 season to eliminate the showtime requirements. So I'm going to leave it at that for right now. I do have an opinion that I eventually would like to share, but because it's listed on here, because it was brought up, does someone on the committee have a proposal that addresses this particular item? Okay.
Tim,
Yes.
so I sent out a survey to my district just to kind of get their opinion on it. I got 9 responses back. Every single one of the responses said they would be in favor of at least eliminating the minimum for the regular season contests. Some of them wanted to eliminate it altogether, but the way I was leaning with it, and a few people on the responses think that maybe eliminating the regular season and then lowering championships from 6 minutes to 5 minutes, maybe. I think that could be a compromise, just to make sure we're still keeping groups somewhat similar show lengths at the end of the season, but encouraging groups to come out early. That's where most of my district was.
Okay. Anybody else? Comments?
We had a very similar response in District 2. A lot of people were about eliminating the requirements this year.
Connor, can you give us some background as to what their thinking was on that? What was the reason?
I didn't really get a fleshed out rationale. Alan, I think, could speak more of that. Alan, would you be willing to voice that?
I'm more than willing to speak. I just didn't want to be out of turn since I'm not on the committee. Is this okay with you, Mr. Allen?
Absolutely.
Cool. I've spoken to probably 10 band directors in our area and across the state, and they're all in the process of thinking that eliminating a minimum for this coming year would really suit their needs. Most band directors are anticipating that I've talked to in our area and across the state are anticipating a 15% to 20% drop in membership compared to their 2019 numbers. Most band directors and we've started in Madisonville. We've had 2 rehearsals. We have, I think, 14 students who have marched 2 or more marching seasons. We have a handful that have marched a marching season. And, we have probably 60% of the band, 70 that have marched 0 marching seasons. So I'm also speaking from our case too, when I give this information. And it's the type of thing where I think that we don't need to be penalized, in my opinion. In 2021, we don't need to be penalizing what band directors can do with their limited resources and inexperienced bands. I don't want to see penalties incurred upon bands for not having a minimum amount on a scale that KMEA has, scale where it increases. I think a lot of band directors, and I think Joe Craig said it eloquently at a band chair, not a marching band chair meeting about a month ago, but we also have limited resources. Do we want to pour them into props? Do we want to pour them into extra staff, or do we want to pour it into extra staff where we teach them how to play? Because we've all missed so much time as well. So I've not run into any opposition on it. Everyone I've just casually asked across the state and in our district has been in high support of it, as Austin. I think that was Austin that spoke before Connor. Thank you for allowing me to discuss it.
You bet. Thank you for sharing your views. Austin, did you have any other input from your district as far as why they wanted this eliminated?
Yeah, I mean, it was really similar to what Alan said. A lot of people just feel like they've missed so much time. They're going to have a really low number of students who've actually done a season before. I know Joe responded. Joe might be able to speak on what he's feeling. I'm sure he's talked to some people about it. But it's universal, at least in our district. And I would say if we're universal, it's probably going to be pretty close to that across the state, that people they want that freedom to be able to do just a little bit less time wise and try to get the quality as high as they can. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I agree. I think I was one of the folks that said the idea of kind of maybe a hybrid between the two, of having, early in the season, we all know that who knows even what the summer's going to look like. I know our district, we still haven't been told, if we can have full on band camps like we normally would and those kind of things. So bands will probably come out of the gate a little slower, either due to training or restrictions that may still be in place on them. So early in the season, getting rid of the requirement will encourage them to come out and get to those early season contests. But hopefully by the end of the season, I think that every band is hoping to have as close to a normal show as possible. So maybe adding back in a minimum time requirement by the weekend of state championships, or even the last weekend of the regular season or something like that, to kind of put it in between. But I think early on, I don't think there's a lot of band directors that are going to balk at not having a minimum time requirement at the beginning of the season.
Just out of curiosity, any of you three that have spoken, or four, as far as if you were taking your band out to their first show, what would you say, just an estimate of what you think you time-wise you would have on the field? Just kind of curious. Would you have 3 minutes or 4 minutes on, do you think?
I think a lot of it depends on the size of the group, and where you're coming from. I know that when I was at Beechwood, and the band was a little smaller, especially when it first started, it seemed like we could learn things a little faster and get things out there a little bit quicker. And when I first came to Ryle, I realized, when all the 5A band directors talked about how things move slower, they were right. It just takes longer to get the kids from the school to the parking lot. Everything just takes a little bit longer to do and moves a little bit slower. But I remember even before we had these conversations, when I was at Beechwood, I would host the first weekend typically pretty much every year. And a lot of the larger groups would be really up to the wire of the time requirements. Some of them would even do kind of like a salute during the pre-show kind of thing to get their extra 30 seconds or whatever they needed to do to get up to the requirement for the time. So I know that even before, on a normal year, some of the bigger groups are like our Mass and Centrals and so forth. It takes them a while to get the whole show on the field. So I think a lot of it's going to be dependent on the size of the group.
Randy, Corey, and I have sweated in non-pandemic years, even the minimum, getting it in, as Joe just described. We've tricked the system on both ends of it, and that in non-pandemic years. And I would just hate to see us put a penalty on a minimum time when we're all trying to re-recruit, reestablish, and it's going to take. We had our beginner meeting for sixth graders. I had 10 kids there. I usually start 75. So it's not only going to be a high school issue, but this is going to make it a lot easier, in my opinion, on all of us if we just take away this minimum for one more year and be able to recruit and retain and train and teach kids and the vast majority of the band is going to be inexperienced.
Thank you, guys. I was just, the reason I asked that question is because I was looking back through the minutes. I think I shared this with Dr. Strobe, looking back through the minutes from a year ago at our April meeting, 2020, we went through a first and second reading, and we voted to change the minimum time requirements from what it was currently, which was at that time, up until that April meeting, was in the first week, week 1, it was minimum 4 minutes. And week 2, we added a minute. Each week we added a minute. And then we changed it to week 1 and 2 would be a 4-minute minimum. And then weeks 3 and 4 would be 5 minutes minimum. And then week 5 on would be 6 to 10. I just wanted to mention that. And then I also wanted to pose the question of, are we talking about also putting a less than 10-minute, well, let's see, if we go, do we change it from 10 minutes down to a lower number on the finishing end as well?
I know we talked about that last year, and I think most people were against that idea. I think somebody said that they already had a 9.5-minute show picked out. That person's not on the committee anymore, but yeah, I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
I think it was just, go ahead.
David, go ahead.
Okay. Another thing to consider in favor of reducing the minimum number or eliminating it completely is I'm curious in your own districts if there's been word of return to normal, and if there is going to be a return to normal when it comes to protocols, distancing, rehearsal protocols, how much time you can be together through the summer. We haven't heard yet. We don't know if when we come back in the fall, if we're still going to be in masks and 6 feet apart and rehearsal minimum. So there's that angle as well, where there's still some unknown that could hinder how much rehearsal time could, depending on the district, you could invest. So there's also the consideration of, we experienced that last year and even through the school year, minimal rehearsal time, in addition to all the other great thoughts that have been given already. That's just one more thing to consider and think about.
Any other thoughts from anybody? Patrick, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just somebody from my district came and said something to me, and with something that I agree with. We both did not feel that there should be just a free reign on how long you perform, because it'd be so hard if somebody came with a minute show and the next person had a 7-minute show. Obviously, the 1-minute show would be easily to be perfected, and I'm sure everybody's thought about this. And I was just going to voice the concern of the person from my district and myself as well. I think it should be shortened because of all the unknown variables statewide and what could come up, but not sure if not having any restrictions and no penalties, or not even a penalty thing. I think everybody should be shooting for, we just did WGI indoor for the first time, and we had to do a 5-minute show, which seemed very odd, but we could wrap up all of our thoughts, and the pacing was done well. So maybe that's something, groups could shoot for.
Tying back into what Brian was saying, and maybe an appendix for Module 1 could be something addressing the length of shows and the timing of shows as you consider that score and you're putting down.
Yeah, that's unquestionable, David, that Brian would want to take note of that. Certainly, let's don't get careful that we don't, get too far off. I think, Mr. Chairman, that what you're hearing is probably a fairly overwhelming sentiment among those who are competing that they would like free reign on the minimum time. And some even into the point of the championships, although that they might be willing to, allow KMEA to impose an amount of 4 or 5 or something minutes minimum once you got to championships, to try and give people a goal to shoot for, to try to keep it a little bit apples to apples. I'm trying to think of the reasons why we have a minimum in the first place. Why contests across the country have a minimum? Why not just let somebody come out and do the best 1 minute of a show ever and see if that can knock down the mediocre 10-minute show the other band put on? It's really hard to compare those two, because what is achievement? Achievement in performing arts, achievement is what you do and kind of how long you do it. So that it's not an easy answer when you realize we are putting on a contest, and we want to come back in with kind of kid gloves, I think, for each other and everything, and a kinder, gentler SMBC after a fashion. But on the other hand, once we get there, we want people to think it was a credible contest and that people should be proud to win, because it really was a thing. If we have to be careful that we don't, and I don't know that anybody's suggesting this, but I just don't be careful that a side effect is not that that it's not, there's no rigor in the event. It can go too far, and it can turn into a festival if you want it to, but I don't think that's what people want, because since 1986, it's been a contest. So that's some of the stuff I've been thinking about. Your judge coordinator, after a conversation with me, Mr. Chairman, did talk with Gary Markham and ask him about why Gary thought there is a minimum, and maybe George might be willing to share that, just to balance the conversation a little bit. I understand how people feel, but I want to be sure they feel good about it when it's all over too. At least hope so.
Yeah, John, I did talk to Gary, and Gary said point blank is to level the playing field. That's why there's a minimum for everybody. And that's all he really had to say about it. at that point. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what I suspected anyway, but it was good to hear from Gary. Gary's telling me the same thing.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is either definitely reducing or eliminating the minimum during the regular season, but having a minimum for the last 2 weeks. Would it be safe to say that's a starting point here? Is there actually a proposal on the table that we can have a motion on and discuss?
Yeah, somebody who
Yeah.
has an opinion about how we should configure this probably should just put it in the form of a motion.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and stick a motion out there. So I would motion for there to be no time restrictions for the 2022, is that 22 or 21? 21 season. And a 5-minute, a 5-minute minimum at championships events.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'd second that.
Who's that?
Is that Patrick?
Patrick Brady.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes,
Second
sir.
for Patrick. Okay. So the motion is no time minimum restrictions during the regular season, and at state championships, a minimum of a 5-minute show production.
Well, that when you say championships, are you talking semifinals, state finals, or regionals?
I think we're
All right.
talking about the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I would amend
Okay,
that to the SMBC.
Yeah.
There you
And
go.
I'll enforce why that's probably a really good idea, because theoretically, doesn't always work, but theoretically, quarterfinals is the last place that we can catch somebody with something that they don't want in their show. Like, I'm not even going to mention what, breaking a rule that they don't realize they're breaking the rule. I don't want to start something, Tim. So that's where we can catch them at quarterfinals, and then they don't do it on the big day. That's the hope. So I wouldn't have it to where they can still add another minute of their show that might have something in it. It's better if they have the whole thing out by quarterfinals, if at all possible.
Dr. Strobe, that's your thought process there is why I was thinking maybe we could enforce it for the last week or last 2 weeks of the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
Because for some bands, if you don't catch it at the regionals week, the season might be over anyway. Does that make sense? Especially with a smaller
Yes.
semifinals of only 12 bands.
Well, you could Austin, just what you could do is you could come up with how you think that should be and see if Brian would accept it as a friendly amendment. And if he doesn't like it, then you can make a motion to amend, and we can go through that convoluted process.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm going back and forth in my head if it would be safe to do one weekend, because I know not everybody goes out that last weekend before championships. So if you made it 2 weekends, you should catch everybody.
Austin, I think I would be comfortable with going ahead and amending it to be 1 week.
I agree. That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion. We have a second. No time restraints during the regular season until beginning the week before SMBC, 5-minute minimum. Floor is open for discussion.
Just to verify, if you've got a group in the early season that says, hey, we think we can only muster up a minute or two, and we know that there's another group that's going to have 6-7 minutes out there, that group can always elect to do comments only or do a festival class or anything like that. Correct? Because
nobody does festival class, but comments only they could do. I mean, it's just nobody does it. It's there, but
I had one director in my district that reached out and said, if you had a group that, what didn't know because of the circumstances what they were going to be able to do or not do, would it be possible for them to there may be to be a separate class for them to compete in, or just do comments only, or festival division, or that kind of thing. And because I think, you know, some of the concern that's been brought up already is a group that has a little show out there that's super clean versus a group that has a lot out there that maybe is not as perfected. I think this person was coming from it from the opposite standpoint of, I know that my show with minimal content versus another group who has maybe more content and rigor, you know, that my group's not going to have a chance from a competitive standpoint. So I just wanted to clarify that, and that's all I have.
Any other discussion or thoughts?
Here's the way I've written it down, if it's okay with you, Mr. Allen. Motion by Ellis, seconded by Brady, to eliminate the minimum time for a show for the first 5 weeks of the regular season and a minimum of 5 minutes for the last week of the regular season and the championship. And we're just talking about this year. Well, we should say for 2021, shouldn't we?
Yes. And are there exactly 6 weeks of competition?
Yes. Yes, that's why it's safe to say that.
Okay. Yeah. And for 2021.
To eliminate in 2021 the minimum time. There I go.
Yeah. So my next question is, if we vote on this right now, we're assuming, well, the question is this will this require a second reading? Do we take this back to our districts? Is there a second reading? We would have to call a special meeting to enforce that, or to at least address that and vote on it. Or is this sufficient to have a one-time reading and a vote today? That's a question.
It's a radical enough change that a second reading would be a good idea. And do you not think, I certainly do, this committee is going to meet again, something like last summer, I imagine, as things begin to unfold, and especially with the specter of a plan B being a possibility, I certainly imagine we would. Would that be soon enough? I mean, if we met in late June, would that be soon enough for people, or would they be aggravated because we waited so long to make that call or to make that second reading? I don't know. You could also have one of those extremely short meetings, one issue meeting in May.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I like that idea, the one issue meeting in May. That way, this does ensure that band directors have time to make plans accordingly, if indeed this passes as it's stated. It wouldn't take us 20 minutes to run the meeting and get it done. So,
right.
So it's to me, it seems like we should pass it here today, if that's what happens, which I think it will.
The ground will be shifting a lot over the next several months. So meeting more often is going to be a better situation for this, even if it is a brief meeting.
Exactly. So my suggestion is that we do a first reading. We shortly after this meeting, we send out this information to disseminate it to the masses and get feedback, and then we meet within a month to decide on this proposal. Everybody okay with that? All right, hearing no disapproval of that. Any other discussion on this proposal? Read it one more time, Dr. Strobey.
Motion by Ellis, seconded by Brady, to eliminate in 2021 the minimum time for a show for the first 5 weeks of the regular season and a minimum of 5 minutes for the last week of the regular season and the championships.
Okay, I'm just thinking of the words here. The first one is, you use the term minimum for both cases. So it's a minimum, we're throwing out the minimum for the first.
Oh, I didn't say how much.
Yeah.
To eliminate the 2021, the minimum time for the first 5 weeks and a minimum time of 5 minutes for the last week of the regular season and the championships.
There you go.
That's what I said, but I couldn't.
Okay. All right. That's
Still getting my head around it.
Make sure it was worded properly.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the proposal as it stands. Let's just to be truthful, or fair and transparent. Let's go around the room here and voice your vote. District 1.
Aye. In favor,
2.
yes.
2.
Yes.
3.
Yes.
4.
Yes.
5.
Yes.
6.
Yes.
7.
Yes.
8.
Yes.
9.
Yes.
10.
Yes.
11.
Yes.
And 12.
Yes.
All right. The motion carries. Proposals first reading is passed. And so, Dr. Strobe, I would suggest that shortly, within the next few days, that we get this out to all our constituents and get some feedback. And we'll talk about setting our next meeting at the end of this meeting.
I'll put it in that same email about 5A bands keeping the 23rd of October open.
All right. Very good. Okay. April, as you know, is our sanctioning meeting. And so that is what is next on the agenda as far as sanctioning for marching contest for 2021. Dr. Strobe's done a lot of great work here in getting a list sent out, and along with maps. And then we'll talk about possible regional quarterfinal sites shortly thereafter. But let's get into the sanction of regular season contests for 2021. Dr. Strobe, I'll turn this over to you.
This should go, I think this is the easy one of the two by far. If you look at the map, it's I did a little different version, a way of doing it this year. I put it into a slideshow. So when the hosts had sent in their applications listing their preferred date, I put it into a slide, put the map in, and put the dots on, and listed the dates and everything. And then a few days later, after I sent that out to the hosts, that somebody said, "Hey, I'd like to change weeks. I want to get away from that crowded week and go to the less crowded week over here." So I put that as the first slide and bumped the original slide down to slide 2. So as you work your way down, you're working your way back in history and the evolution of this. And if you go all the way down to, I think it's slide 8, you'll see that there were some really unbalanced weeks. I mean, incredibly unbalanced. You knew half of those contests were going to fail on such a week, because Kentucky can only handle so many in a given week. Well, it got better every time. And as you see in the first slide, the one that opens when you go right to the link, that's how it ended up. And that's what they want. You'll occasionally see the 2 Nelson County schools are on the same day. Well, they used to be on a different day, and they both moved at the same time to the day they moved to. Point being, they intend to probably share judges and share bands, and one be morning, afternoon, the other being evening, something like that. I didn't talk to them, but it was just that's my assumption based on the fact that they literally moved within an hour of each other. So it's as usual, it's what they've looked at. They have had a chance to do it, and unlike the old days way back, and Tim and Pauletta remember with me that we'd be ending up calling people and texting them, "Are you sure you want to be on the same?" Because they really hadn't had a chance back then. We didn't have the technology, or they didn't. Jim Fern and those folks didn't have the technology we do now to share and collaborate on documents across the internet and do the work in front. So I think it's pretty solid, and I would recommend that the list or the list on the map, whichever, they're identical, be accepted as next year's sanction contest bunch.
Do we need to have this in the form of a motion?
Yeah.
A vote?
Well, yeah, somebody. Yeah, I think somebody should move to accept.
Okay. Do we have a motion to accept the sanctioned marching contest for 2021?
So moved.
Curtis Irvin.
Second.
Second is Michael Stone. Okay. Any objections to the sanction of marching contest list for 2021 as presented? Hearing none, these contests that have been presented and listed are approved for 2021. All right. C on new business is regional quarterfinal site selection for 2021. I know Dr. Strobey's typing, making sure this is all in there correctly, but this is his show to explain. So whenever you're ready, Dr. Strobey.
I'm good. I've given you a lot this year, and part of it is that I was just able to I don't know, just carve out the time to get this put in such a way. Also, the fact that we're doing so much more on Google Drive anymore than we used to. It's very easy for me to share with you the scanned applications. And so you can go in and you can dig deep, and you can see, and anybody who's watching and has seen the agenda can go in and see. I mean, you can't get much more transparent. Not that there's been any problems before, but I think it's reassuring. People can see what these different sites offer. I also shared with you the regional maps, which are kind of a good reference. People will say, well, we don't know what class people are going to be in. It's going to be all over the place this year. I'll bet it's not. I'll bet you that most of the bands are affected fairly similarly in their band size, proportionally. You know, now the largest band may lose the most people, but it'd be proportional to their size, in my guess. And I think that most bands will probably end up in the same class they were. There's no way for me to know that, but just hearing similar cries of anguish from all points, I think that that's probably fair. So it might be okay to look there for a couple of years ago at where the classes fell, and you can see where the 1A bands were and why we put a site that was somewhere within the clump of West 1A bands. And we put a site within the clump of East 2A bands. It would be possible to put a site completely outside that clump and have everybody have to go east to get there, or west, you know. And like if there were a site in Elizabethtown, that would pretty much be the case for any class. You'd have bands coming, all the bands coming from a given direction, and the bus mileage would be greater. And it would be difficult for the extreme bands to get home comfortably that evening, which for quarterfinals or Plan B championship, if it came to that, is pretty important. So that's that. I also provided a schedule of the Plan B. If you're looking at a site and thinking, could they handle the Plan B? That kind of can give you a sense of how I think the Plan B day would work if we were to reluctantly go to that. Now that is totally a draft and all my work, and there's been no input, and I'm not stuck on it, believe me. So people who have great ideas to fix that, that's another discussion, and we can do that later. But that's at least the general idea. You see that in the West, we have, well, and I'll talk about the exception first. Taylor County, very nice facility, and very strong program, good director, good band boosters, a great site, but it's not really east or west. I couldn't put it east or west because it is west of all the other sites and east of all the west of all the east sites, other east sites, and east of all the other west sites, fairly central to the state. And that's why I put a star with it, and I put it in both columns. So in the West, the Hopkinsville, Christian County, they have collaborated actually from the get-go. You may remember in the past, we've got an application from Hoptown, got an application from Christian County, and sometimes we've gone and said, we're going to give half of it to each of you, something like that. I got in touch with the directors early on after I don't know if I got applications from both, but somewhere early on. And they said, yeah, we're just going to talk about this up front and apply together. So that's what that is. Hopkinsville Christian County, they're at the Stadium of Champions. That is a grass field. We've never had trouble with it, though. It's very well drained, well designed. And as grass fields go, it's probably one of the best. All the other sites are artificial turf, FYI. We have Warren Central, we have Warren East, and we have Taylor County. And I think we can. Well, I don't know if we can with the Taylor County having a foot in both camps by my call. I don't know if we can talk about one without the other. So I will mention, let's see, Warren Central has hosted before under a previous director. Warren East has hosted under the current director. Hopkinsville Christian County, of course, has hosted under the current directors. In the East, let me give a kind of just an overview. Madison Southern has hosted before. Bourbon County, he's willing to host do I have this right, Michael? Is it the A plan or that you would do? That's right. Yeah, if it were the A plan, you would do it. Yeah, the B plan is, let's say, maybe not a good fit there. GRC. Now, if you look on his application I don't know, TMI, but on his application it just says A, but he conferred with me later and said, now that I understand it better, go ahead and put B on there. He said, that's fine. So that was just a phone call or text or something like that between AJ Cook and me. So I added the B there, AB. North Laurel would do AB. South Laurel would do a B. If it came to it, they'd be willing to do that. And then Taylor County, once again, would be willing to do both. Now, probably maybe look at the West, which I don't know, it might be easier. Look at the West and see what you guys think. And of course, Grant knows that he needs to recuse from discussion on this. I know you don't need to leave the meeting because it's going out on YouTube. There's no hiding this year. So that's fine though. But I just suggest that you would, of course, not participate in the discussion about it. And that would be the only person on the voting meeting that has an application in. So you can discuss if you wish. There can be a motion for the West sites. It's in your hands.
What are the differences between? I spent years in Bowling Green, and I have never set foot in Warren Central. What are the differences between Warren Central and Warren East as far as stadiums go?
Green grass and bluegrass is one difference. Warren East has the distinction of having grass like what is it? Boise State got the blue like your jacket. So that's one difference. Let's see. I think the Warren Central campus has a little more maneuvering room. I think I'll tell you, David Graham. Now, David has to watch himself because he does have relations who are involved with the Warren Central program, so he needs to be careful, and he will. But he knows these differences probably better than anybody on the call.
The stadiums themselves are identical, with the exception of the field, coloring it east. I think I'm right. The Central Complex was finished a year or two before East's, and I think they learned a little bit in logistics when they built the East one, as far as how they laid everything out. But I do think parking is a little bit parking space is a little bit more available at Central, especially with there's a community college right across the street from it. So assuming that's available, and I know Mr. Sells has had at least some conversations with them, then there's ample parking to host a large event. And that's not to say there isn't plenty at East. There is, but I think there's just a little bit more at Central.
Do you happen to know if where, I know this is kind of wild, but where the sun is at Central?
Oh God, at Central, the sun is in the press box's face, mostly all afternoon. So you're not performing into it at all. And I believe actually it's the reverse at East. I think the performers are facing the sun.
I'm looking at it on Google Maps, and that's how it is.
Okay.
What about the distance from the field to the press box? Is it the same at both?
It is the same, and it is about 2/3 of a mile. Maybe and Grant, of course, is in Hopkinsville. I always felt like, Hopkinsville, there's the field, and then a good bit of space, and then the track, and then the stadium. Well, at East and Central, it's even further away. Now they're great facilities. Press box is nice, turf's nice, but it's a long way from the stands. But it's the same at both places.
And it's the same for everybody.
And it is the same for everybody.
Other comments?
Tim, I know this is slightly unrelated, but I just want to make sure, just something I was thinking about. I know right now we're operating on the assumption that there isn't a need for a 5A quarterfinal. What was the number of bands we needed to have to where we would have to have a 5A quarterfinal? Was there a number? Do you remember what that number is?
Well, I'm trying to remember. I'm gonna mess this up, I'm afraid, Joe, but it's something like, if you're supposed to, in the past, you were supposed to have 16 bands at semifinals. So now we're supposed to have 12.
That's correct.
So if we have more than 12 5A bands, then we've exceeded how many are supposed to be in semifinals. I'm not sure if we went through with this. I think maybe we said there could be up to 14 or something like that.
We did, John. I think
okay, is that what it was?
We said if there were maybe one or two extras, we just throw them into semifinals.
Let them all go to semifinals and not mess up their previous week, just to eliminate 2 bands, as has happened in the past, because that's what the rule said. So I think kind of a sloppy answer here, but I would say if there are more than 14 5A bands, then likelihood is that we would have to give them a place. I don't think that's going to happen.
And see, that's where I guess, and I know we haven't really done it formally, but I've kind of talked around, just asked some few folks. We had 11 in 2019. So some of the groups that weren't there have talked to me at least about that they're strongly considering doing that just due to finances and everything else. And, what they're doing that. So I don't know if we would get 3 more or not, but I definitely think there's a chance of that happening. I don't know if anyone else has heard any different about some of the groups that weren't in 5A at that point, but when I had spoke with Bill and a few of those other folks, they had kind of indicated that was something they were looking at. They just weren't sure yet. So,
well, it's a good point. And if possibly a way to approach this is that what we need to choose here is sites for the 1 through 4As, 2 sites in the West and 2 sites in the East. And there are some other options. So possibly leave it Possibly we'd have another short meeting later on, but we know who the people who are interested in hosting could be. And for example, if we did in the West, we might need to move classes around. And like we used to do, we would do in the West, typically it was like a 1 and, I don't know, 4 and 5A at a site, and 1 and 2 at another site, and 3 did its own thing at a third site. So that's what we'd have to have and now we'd need some more judges if we did that. So, we'd have to scurry again, but not to confuse things too much, because that's what we would just have to add another site. And if we wanted to, we could get into how we would do that, today, in terms of, well, and if we needed 5A, you'd put 5A West at Christian County and take the 1As and throw them, somewhere else, type of thing. We could do that.
And it might not even be needed. I think we probably should, at some point, we get a survey out to the 5A folks just to see who's leaning towards coming to KME. I know they don't have to decide right away, but you get an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Austin put that in his survey that he sent out to our district. Just what are you planning on doing, to get an idea? Because I don't know if it's needed or not, but it might be something worth looking at.
I think that's really a good idea, honestly.
I'll also check through our minutes. I know that we installed this, we lowered it to 12 bands. I don't know if it's worded in that if we had 1 or 2 extras, we throw them in there. I think we discussed that and said, sure, let's do that. But I want to double check that, and we'll get that information out as well, as far as what the exact number is for 5A bands in quarterfinals. Okay, so
David Sinners has his hand up.
I'm sorry, David, go ahead. Sorry.
Hey, I don't have a dog in the fight, but I'm just curious. I'm familiar with the stadium in Hopkinsville. Also familiar with the campus at Taylor County. Also know that both of those sites, I've judged in Taylor County, and I've had experience with the directors and the parents there. I've competed several times in Hopkinsville and had experience with those parents that are helping there, and both are well managed and well run. But the big thing for me, thinking from director, is the space around the schools or the stadiums at both are phenomenal. Hopkinsville probably had some of the best warm-up space that I've ever had anywhere. Just the soccer fields wide open, lots of room. So parking and warm-up space, I'm just not as familiar with the Warren County schools. If anybody could comment a little bit more on that. I know we talked about the stadiums, very nice stadiums, very nice fields. The only really negative thing, and that's not a negative, I don't want to say it that way, about Hopkinsville, is it is a grass field, but my bands have marched on it many times, and we've it's always been, it's a really good field. It has probably the best vantage point of any stadium in the West, I would guess. But specifically parking and warm-up space, how is that? Is it sufficient? Is it good at the Warren Central, Warren East? Somebody who's more familiar with that.
I think they're both sufficient. I'm not going to say that either is as nice as Hopkinsville. That soccer field's really convenient. When I believe for this weekend, Central would need to use student parking lot areas for warm up, and I'm honestly not positive. I took a group to East at a contest. I believe we warmed up in the grass in front of the school, which was fine. There wasn't anything wrong with it. Logistically, the way the stadium is built, kind of at the foot of the hill at Central, there can be a little bit of a challenge getting things to the field. You kind of have to, if you have a long trailer, and this may be way too much detail, but this is what you asked for, David. If you're taking, if you have a long trailer of stuff, it's almost better to pull up to the soccer field and turn around to get there, which, takes another minute or two but everyone's aware of that. It's the same for everybody. I think as far as actually moving on the campus, it's a little bit easier to do at East. It's just a flatter campus and a little more well laid out. But as Andrew's question pointed out, your students will be facing the sun there. It's going to be at their back for Central. They're both excellent facilities. There's nothing, no one overwhelming factor, I don't think, for either.
Thank you.
Let me just throw this out there. I'm looking at the West candidates here, and there are 4. Is the plan, Dr. Strobey, to combine classes down to just 2 of these sites, or is
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's how many judges we're hiring, and that's what we did. What we were planning on last year.
So we're narrowing this down to 2 then.
Yes, please.
And it'd be 1A, 3A, 1A, 2A, and then is there a designation of who would be where?
Well, I would say that if Hopkinsville Christian County does one, then 4A needs to be there because the hosts are 4A. And if Warren Central does it, what were we going to be at Warren Central? Mr. Graham, was it 3? And then Warren East, I think, is still typically has been 2A. And so we set that up. Now, if once it all shakes out, Warren Central turns out to be a 2A, we have to be careful about that. But what we did last time was we put 1A and 4A at Hopkinsville Christian County, and we put 2A and 3A, kind of to be on the safe side, at Warren Central. Warren East is where it was last time. Sorry, Warren East. It was a bit of a trek for Murray High School that had grown into 2A given the new way of classifying, and they made their way over to Bowling Green for that, and that was the farthest band that had to come to that site.
I will mention that it's been 4 or 5 years, but Lindsey Wilson College in Adair County did host I think at that time it was 2 or 3A West. We hosted a West Regional.
3A, I think.
3A in
that
Columbia,
was typically
which is about the same location as Taylor County. I know
roughly.
John has mentioned that they are right in the center. They could go west, they could go east, and I think the only band that really had extreme distance to cover was Paducah Tillman. They came that year, and it was a pretty good trek for them. Everybody else was within a pretty good, reasonable distance. So I just wanted to mention that in terms of Taylor County is about the same distance as it would be for Adair County.
Yeah, it's true. I'm opening the 3A, just for my own, since you mentioned it, I'm opening the 3A regional map slowly because I'm on Zoom and everything goes slower.
3A has also been at Hart County, which isn't really that far, much closer than Taylor County. Hart County and Taylor County and Adair are all right there, kind of in the same area.
Right, that's right. Yes, so
in essence, we have to eliminate 2.
We do. All things considered, and there are several variables.
Yeah, I know that I'm just thinking back to other years when we had to make decisions like this. A lot of times we did depend on those that had hosted it before and had success with it. I'm trying to think how we've approached. I'm looking at Taylor County again, and from the approach of it would be a new person, a new facility, but indeed a good facility with artificial turf. What consideration they should be given here. So I don't mean to muddy the waters, but I'm just I'll just throw it out to thoughts from the rest of the committee.
Right. And our difficulty is that Andrew's band would be involved in one of these. So would Grant's, but he's mute right now. And Brian's band would. Brian, what were you ending? You were 3A the last time we spun the wheel.
Yeah, that's correct.
So you would likely be involved in, probably in all likelihood, would be involved in the 3A site, whichever that turned out to be.
Let's see. The last time we ran this, 3A went to. Didn't 3A go to both sites? They had quarterfinals at East and then semifinals at West. Is that right, Curtis?
Yeah, we weren't there at East, I think, but I think state semis were at West,
right?
Central rather.
Like
Central, right. Yeah. It was a terribly rainy day and all that. And well, of course, what it was is Warren East hosted 2 and 3A West quarterfinals. So the 3As went there. And then they only hosted 2A on semifinals because they were 2A. The rare band, the pretty good sized stadium that's a 2A band. And so then that put the other at Central. Of course, that was that rainy and construction at Central. That was a mess, but that's over.
I'm glad you said that because I'm hesitant to offer too much of opinion on that on the Central day because it was just such a horrible experience with the weather. But I do seem to remember, is all the warm-up area back there been fixed now at Central? Was there construction back there or something strange like
construction
that?
Everywhere?
There was, and that's all finished.
That's all finished now. Okay.
So
in
a way,
move this along, we need to make a decision.
Yeah, Andrew and Brian might lead the way on this. Just saying.
I ended up enjoying East a lot, even though I didn't know if I would because of the color of the the color of the field. But I did end up enjoying that location. But I cautiously say that because, again, the experience at Central was was not caused by them and was also, the weather, or not the weather, but the construction had an impact on us. So,
Our kids had performed at East several times in the last couple of years, and the facilities were fine because we went on early. We ended our season with the sun in our eyes every year. And I think we were there 3 or 4 times in the last 2 years. That was huge for my kids.
You're saying that the sun, see, we performed their quarterfinals at night, so I wasn't aware of that. So the sun is a problem during the day, possibly at East, is what you're saying.
It was the last 3 times we performed there.
Yeah, and I would agree if this is a day performance, then I would certainly agree that that's not an experience that any of us would want to have, I don't think.
Well, for one of the classes, it would be. We don't know which yet, but for one of the classes, it would be. Typically, I'll say this, I let the host class go first because that way the students in the band can be free to help host the other class. If you let the host class be last, the band director is reluctant to let those kids wear themselves out guiding bands and so forth all afternoon, then to try to compete and get on to semifinals in the night show. So generally for the good of the event and good of all, if it's at all possible, the host class goes first. So it would likely, if it were Warren Central, to be 2A would go first, and those might be the ones toward the end of that class that were facing the sun.
Hey, Andrew, do you remember if the stadium press box was, I just can't remember if it was further away from the field at Central or East?
I've never been to Central. Like someone said, I think David, I think it's about 3/4 of a mile from the field.
in both cases.
Well, I mean,
No, it was only
it's a,
2/3. It was only 2/3.
okay, yeah. I knew there was a 3 in there somewhere.
I don't think I've been to E since they redid the field, but I know my experiences with at Central, the field seems to be a pretty big distance from the press box.
I think they're about identical. I don't think that's a variable between the two Warren County schools. I think that's equivalently further than you'd like in both cases.
David, it's at Central. Didn't you say it was in the side of a hill, or is there any kind of blocking from wind as well?
No, there's not a wind thing. There's just a little downgrade as you approach the field from the warm up area to the field.
Okay.
I'd like to ask that someone make a motion that, or a suggestion as to possible sites for the West quarterfinals. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we have them at Hopkinsville and Warren East.
Okay, we have a motion from Austin Brawley that the two locations are Hopkinsville and Warren East. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I think I heard Brian in there. Okay. Okay, we have a second. Any discussion?
Do you want to assign classes? Do you want to wait and see what people are and just leave that up to basically Tim and me? Austin?
Yeah, I think we should leave that up to Tim and you. I mean, based on what classes those bands are in.
Okay, so just to clarify again, so Hopkinsville / Christian County, and the other one was Warren Central. Is that correct? Warren Central?
I said Warren East.
Warren East. Okay.
I said Warren East. That's the one that I'm familiar with.
Okay.
You know, we competed there at state semifinals 2 years ago. I thought the parking was great. I thought the stadium was great. There is a distance, you know, a pretty good distance to the front sideline, but if you guys are saying it's the same as Central, I would endorse it. That's where I'm at. If people who are more familiar with the area think it's the other way around, I'd be willing to amend or whatever I need to do.
Any other discussion?
So in the Hopkinsville, Christian County is, as far as the from the field to the press box there, how is that a large distance also?
Yeah, it's a long way.
Lord help the 1As. Okay.
There's no track, however. It's a tall stadium, but there's no track.
Yeah, I think that's the difference at that stadium is that it's mostly bleachers and not track and sideline of the football field like it is.
Well, and the fact that David just said it is so tall that the vantage is better than a low distance stadium. You know, it's high in a distance, so you still have a good vantage. It's a concrete stadium too, so the sound stays in pretty well and comes up. It's not hard to hear the bands there.
Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. I guess we need to go around the room on this. Do we? Or can we just do any objections?
Yeah, I think you could do that. I really think.
Okay, so the motion is for West quarterfinal regionals to be held at Hopkinsville / Christian County and Warren East High Schools. Okay. We're through with discussion. Are there any objections to this? Hearing none. Motion carries, and the West Regionals will be held at Hopkinsville / Christian County and Warren East High School. All right, moving on to the East side.
So Grant can talk now, and and Michael can't, and I think he's the only one, right? He's the only one who has an application in the mix. Maybe we should, in the future, Mr. Allen, maybe we should split the committee into two groups, and the West people pick the East sites, and the East people pick, and just, here you go.
I like it.
I know, be a little more comfortable, wouldn't it?
All right. Is there some background that we need to know, Dr. Strobey, about? Well, we have discussed these. We've discussed the
A little
East
bit, yeah.
sites.
The Bourbon County has hosted us before. Madison Southern has hosted us before. GRC since the new facility, they've hosted us once. It's gone well at all sites. It's been a long time since it's been at North Laurel, but it was there. Oh, gosh, it was during David McFadden's time. So that's been, a couple of directors ago. All these schools, I think, all these schools host regular season contests, so they all have experienced band boosters, and they're not being reckless by applying. They do know what they're doing. They do know how to park cars and sell concessions and guide bands and all these things that you have to do. And as somebody pointed out to me one time, it's actually considerably easier to host quarterfinals than your regular contest, because you're not dealing with the judges and the press box stuff. You're just dealing with the stuff on the ground, basically. If you look at your map, you can see the locations of the schools. Of course, Laurel County and where it is, it's south of any of the others. GRC and Bourbon County are fairly close together. Madison Southern is in Berea, with Southern into Madison County, easy to see on the map. So there we have, last time we did it was 1A and 4A at Madison Southern, 2A and 3A at GRC, who was not competing that day because they were 5A, and probably will be again.
Okay. Do we have suggestions, discussion? And again, our goal, John, is to narrow it down to 2, correct?
Right.
I've been at, I think, all of these sites before with one band or another over the years. I think Madison Southern is a home run for 1A, 4A. I think parking is really good there. The stadium is great turf. So I think that one, at least in my opinion, I think should be a lock. As for the other ones, Bourbon County is a great facility, close to Lexington. GRC is the one that I went to a few years ago. I went to the regular season contest there and the regional. Parking is ample. I mean, we could probably host state finals at GRC if we really wanted to. I've been to that show every time they've had one. So, those would be my 2. If anybody else has any feedback.
Austin, how is what's the distance from the press box at GRC?
It's kind of like, from what I remember, Stadium Champions in Hopkinsville, it's really high, but it's a good vantage point. It's got some distance, but the vantage point's high enough where it doesn't matter as much.
What about
I think
sound
that's
carrying?
fair. I would agree.
What about hearing the band?
I think it was good. I remember I think for both of those shows, I sat up pretty high right below the press box, and I felt like I got a pretty good vantage point and a pretty good accurate representation of what was going on.
Okay.
Austin, is that the new stadium that you're talking about? The new stadium? Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other opinions?
Austin, I think in this case, your motion did specify the classes for the sites, hoping, of course, that the Madison Southern turns out to be 4A, which is probably will.
Yeah, that's why I went with that one.
Yeah,
I know that they've been kind of
easier.
4A forever. Just kind of whatever they do, they're always 4A, it seems like.
Yeah, they don't, they're kind of middle, I think. So you're saying 1A, 4A at Madison Southern and 2A, 3A at GRC, if I understand you correctly.
Yeah, or if we want to keep it consistent and leave that up to you and Tim.
That's what I would start off with. I would only change it if for some reason we had to.
I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the two sites for the East quarterfinals would be Madison Southern and George Rogers Clark. Any discussion?
I'm just wondering, planning ahead, if we have to go with Plan B, is GRC going to be big enough to host all three, or would we need a third site?
The way that, if you look, Jenny, at the draft of the Plan B schedule, how it would work out, that goes up to what, I think 25 bands, which would mean we had 100 bands total in the state, which is not, if Joe's right that some bands are coming back, and we work our way back up to 100, well, our dream came true, I guess. But we would just have to start. We would just have to start a little early. But 4 sites should do it with that BOA style configuration. And that would make, of course, each of the 4 sites more meaningful, which I think is, we want as much meaning as possible out of a Plan B. Others may agree or disagree. I don't know. I think so.
Other discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll bring it to a vote. For those of you that are against the idea of having the East quarterfinal regionals at Madison Southern and GRC, would you please voice your opinion now? Hearing no objections, we move forward with those 2 selections for East quarterfinals for 2021.
It's not an easy discussion. I really appreciate everybody.
All right. Do we need to discuss the draft plan for the schedule for the shell for Plan B? Or is that just for perusal? And do we want to address that, John?
No, that's a perfectly good discussion item in my view. That, as I said, that's simply something that I sat down and did with my one little cloistered brain. So other people may see it and see something exceptionally dumb about it. And if I can make it come up. So I might invite everybody to look at that as a discussion item and see if you have, thoughts about how that looks like it would pan out.
Are you going to share that with us, or do you want us to just get it
Oh,
ourselves?
that's a link in the agenda.
Okay, right, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I just let everybody do their own scrolling.
Sure.
Now you see it starts at 10 a.m. It has a break every 2 hours for the judges. Except at the end, I think I pushed it up to 9 bands because I was trying to just have a round number of 25. This would flex if we had fewer bands. If we had, only 90 bands, it'd only be for 22 and a half bands at each site. And we could handle that in some way, start a little later, give a little bigger break between whatever we thought, and the breaks might move a little. And if there were more bands, we would have to start a little earlier, or I think maybe the break is about as short as it needs to be. Now, being that that's the final week, we might even consider, and this is not something I would do without consulting people, believe me, but we might even consider going a little later, because it is a regional kind of thing. This ends, the last band comes off the field at 10 p.m., whereas at state championship at finals, we come off the field at 11. So if we bump that a little bit later by a decision of the council at a later time, then that I don't think anybody would be upset about that, because they'd still be able to get home. And as we know, the compelling reason that we might go to Plan B is if we get close enough that people say, we can't put kids together in a room. My parents won't allow it, or my administration or school board says that ain't happening this year. Therefore, we cannot afford to come all the way to Lexington area for the statewide championship weekend. In this case, they would be able to get home without doing that, if that turned out to be the objection.
I think as a draft, it looks pretty good. Hopefully we don't have to use it. I know that I've already asked my school board for approval for overnight trips for the fall, and they let us have them. And since they were one of the first ones to pull the plug on us last year, that makes me feel pretty good about the rest of the state. So
could be. Yeah, I think you're right. They were pretty quick to say no go last year. So if that's the same people that say go ahead this year, then maybe it'll work out okay. And we hope so.
Hey, John, is same judges for bands 1 through 25?
Yes. That's the BOA way. All the bands are judged by the same judges all day long. The judges score the bands, probably don't even know what class they're in. I think that's the way it's done. And then the bands that score the highest in each class is the regional class champion. And then just for giggles and fun and excitement, honestly, and I'm not really joking, for the excitement of it, then there's an evening show where an overall regional champion and pecking order placement is found. And it's different, but I actually think that if it turns out this way, although it's not our way and it's not what we're going for, I actually think people would have a pretty good time that day.
I was just thinking, same judges, 2 15-minute breaks. Could you open up the break, the 12 o'clock break, to a half an hour break?
You could. That's not a bad idea, and at all.
That would take 25th band leaving the field approximately 5 o'clock, just 15 minutes later, and you still get a 2-hour break between the 25th band and the first band.
The 25th band is currently leaving the field at 6 o'clock. No, you're right.
They're leaving
4:45. Yeah, they have to clear. They have to clear the lot. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong column. Yeah, or you could start 15 minutes sooner. That's a great George question as to how the judges are treated in that regard at BOA. Are they brought a chicken box lunch and just live with it because we're paying you, or do they take a?
It seems like I'm trying to remember
considerable break.
BOA regional. It seemed like the lunch break was a little longer.
Could be.
I think so. Like Grand Nationals, it's groups, so they're not judging all day long. It's actually a group of judges throughout the day.
Yeah.
At the regional, it's the same judges. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's
so if this happens, it will be on quarterfinal week. Is that correct?
Right.
So it will be with quarterfinal judges.
Right. I know. It's not what we want.
Okay.
But Michael just gave us great news that the conservative Bourbon County Board has said, okay, so maybe this is just all talk.
And it would be better than the alternative.
Oh, yeah.
I agree.
All right. Any other discussion about the schedule for a Plan B? I think it's still a work in progress and can be
yes,
edited and changed as needed. Okay. anything else as far as discussion goes that anybody would like to share? Okay, we are thinking, Dr. Strobey, that we will need to have another meeting, not in the too distant future, to address this proposal that's come to us today. Are we thinking a month? Does that sound reasonable?
Oh, that's plenty of time.
Well, do we want to hone it down shorter?
I would say, of course, here we are at the end of April.
I mean, how long does it take to get a good response? And probably not very long.
Probably not very long. A week or two. But Alan made a good point before. The ground is shifting. And so if you do it too soon, we won't know anything more in a week than we know now. And to take a little further advantage of having to come together. So it's a balancing thing, isn't it? If we're too soon, people won't know anything more than they know now. But if it's too late, it could possibly change what somebody's planning. I don't know. I mean, I think people need to have easy shows next year. And I know that's not exciting as complex shows, but I think that's going to be the compromise most people hopefully make. At any rate, sometime in the middle of May feels right to me, but that's just me. And I think it could be a weeknight, because I think it's going to take anywhere between 20 minutes and 45 minutes, depending on whether another question comes up besides second reading.
In terms of the ground shifting and that kind of thing, aren't we supposed to be finding out maybe by the end of next month if there's going to be a lot of things lifted?
Yeah, I think you're right, Curtis, but I'll bet that won't be enough to tell us whether we're going to Plan B or not. Because everybody's going to say, just like we did last year, wasn't it awful? Because nobody knew anything, because you kept saying, well, let's don't make the decision yet, because maybe it'll get better, which it didn't. But this year it might. So,
But we're still in the same situation. We have to wait longer before we make any kind of rash decision.
Yeah. Well, and don't you think, I mean, gosh, we're trying to talk about a meeting, but I'll bet we're going to have to decide Plan A or Plan B sooner than we want to. I think we're going to have to, at the point at which whatever that drop dead date is that we determine based on things we've got to do, I'll bet that we'll say, I wish we could wait longer. I think that's just the way life has been for a year and a half now, or a year and a month now. Anyway, is there a night of the week that's good or bad?
I'm looking at Thursday, May 20th.
Yeah.
Thursday, May 20th.
Yeah.
Not Sunday at 3 o'clock.
I have to take my garbage out to the curb that night, so I might be a little busy.
We'll go on without you. I'm just throwing that date out there.
Yeah, that would work for me. What about anybody else? Jenny says yes. Michael says yes. Andrew says yes. Pauletta says thumb. Ryan says thumb. Yeah, Austin says thumb. Anybody got a problem with that day? Let's put it that way.
7 o'clock Eastern time.
Is that too early, Andrew? It's okay. He might be eating, but he'll meet.
You'll still get to watch Jeopardy though. So we're good there. Okay.
7 p.m. May 20, Thursday, May 20.
No. Yeah, May 20th. Yeah. Okay. All right.
And pencil in the date for Saturday, November 20th for an in-person meeting. I'm just guessing.
I'm
hoping.
Any other business or discussion? All right, hearing none. thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy weekend and half of your or part of your Sunday to be here to help us out. And we look forward to seeing you guys again in about a month. So thanks so much for coming, and we'll see you soon. Bye.